Okay, I'm beginning. Hello, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Tripura Roundtable. This is brought to you by boomlive. That's boomlive.in. We're fact checkers. We address misinformation. We're trying to keep the internet safe, which is a very difficult undertaking, of course. And we're based in Mumbai and Delhi, and we work out of India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. That's where we do our fact checking. We do it in multiple languages. But if you look at it, if you think about it, India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, we realize this is the part of this area that we don't know very well is very much a part of India, that is our northeastern states. And so in December last year, we launched our Northeast Facts Network. And as part of that, we're doing the Tripura Roundtable today. My name is HR Venkatesh, and I'm the Director of Training and Research here at Boom. And I'm joined by the person who leads the Northeast Facts Network, Dr. Sabina Yasmin Rahman, someone who you'll all know because she was instrumental in putting together this panel. We also have our fact checker, Divya Chandra here, and our producer, Tita Ghosh, and our research assistant, Shulu Dev. So here's how the next 1.5 hours is going to unfold. Each speaker is going to speak about something related to their interests and how it intersects with Tripura for about 3 to 5 minutes. So we have 8 speakers, 7 speakers, maybe the 8 may not be able to join us. And so in about 45 minutes, we'll finish listening to every speaker. 7 or 8 speakers is a lot, as you will imagine. In the second round, each speaker will talk about what we often get wrong about Tripura. When I say we, I mean the mainland or maybe other states outside of Tripura in the Northeast, or maybe outside of India as well. So let me quickly introduce our esteemed panel of guests. Very, very exciting panel. And this is the order in which they're going to be speaking as well. We have Amresh Debbarma, who's a PhD candidate at the Department of Studies in Society and Development at the Central University of Gujarat. And he's probably going to talk about the Tripura land movement. We have Bikash Rai Debbarma, veteran author and president, Roman script for Kokborok Choba, and probably going to talk about the Kokborok language movement. I'll do a slightly more detailed introduction to each speaker soon. We have Romita Riang, who's a women's rights lawyer and a PhD scholar, the Department of Law, Northeastern Hill University in Shillong. She focuses also on, among other things, on indigenous women's rights and humanitarian work. We have Vishwendu Bhattacharjee, media scholar and correspondent Times of India, who focuses on, among other things, on the development of the press and molding democracy. We have Sunil Kalai, filmmaker and assistant professor at the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at Tripura University. Also talking about the media landscape there, representing Indigeneity. We have Thomas Malsom, PhD scholar, Department of Sociology, Northeastern Hill University, Shillong, talking about extractivism and resource governance. We have Vishwaranjan Tripura, Assistant Professor, Center for Social Justice and Governance at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai. Among other things, we'll also talk about contextualizing policy and dialogue. And we have R.K. Debbarma, Chairperson, Center for Peace and Conflict Studies, Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Now, as I understand it, about 2 minutes ago, Bikash Rai hadn't yet joined. So we'll take a call on whether he'll be able to join soon. But first up, let's bring in Amresh Debbarma. As I said, he's a PhD candidate at the Department of Studies in Society and Development, Central University of Gujarat, Gandhinagar. His research interests include social movement studies, identity politics, migration, and tribal studies. He's also a member of the United Tripura Support. It's over to you. Amresh, the floor is yours.
Hello, good evening all. Thank you, Venkatesh sir.
And I'm starting keeping your time, okay? So.
And the entire team and all the participants and panelists attendees here. Thank you for giving me an opportunity in the Tripura Roundtable conference organized by Northeast Fact Network, Boom. So, hi, this is Amresh. Recently, I have submitted my PhD thesis from the Department of Society and Development, Central University of Gujarat, Gandhinagar. And my research interest lies in social movement studies, identities, migration, tribal studies. And at present, I am associated with an NGO, which is called United Tripura Forum. That's it.
The whole idea is you have 4 minutes. You've only spoken for 30 seconds.
This is for only introduction part.
No, I've already introduced you once, if you just heard. So this is good because important to repeat our introductions. But I would urge you talk about a little bit about your focus area and how it intersects with the issues of Tripura at large.
Basically, I'm looking at the kind of movement which has been going on since 1960s, how the movement have transitioned from this resource-based mobilization to identity-based movement, how the trajectories of movement have changed, and how the phases of movement have changed. This I'm looking at this movement.
Okay, you know what? We'll come back to you for more specific questions. Just wanted to tell everybody here at the, who's here that we'll have questions and answers a little later in this event. So right now we're doing the first round, really. Let's bring in Romita Ryang at this point. Romita is a lawyer and indigenous women's rights activist. She's currently pursuing a PhD at the Department of Law, Northeastern Hill University, Shillong, and her work focuses on gender, social justice, and social legal activism as well. Romita, the floor is yours. You have 4 to 5 minutes.
Good evening to everyone, and thank you, Venkatesh, for giving me this wonderful opportunity. And in this panel, I'm the only woman voice, so I'll try to do justice. My focus area is mostly on indigenous women's rights and the position of indigenous women in Tripura. Generally speaking, the condition of women in Tripura are comparable to those in other states. In general, whether they are indigenous, tribal, or non-tribal, women possess all the rights and privileges of whatever enshrined under law, and as a women, we are entitled to all the government policies for protection and welfare benefits. And I believe that any crime or wrongdoing against an individual is a crime against humanity. We all know that laws and policies are well established and are in place. But the crucial question remains, how do we avail ourselves of this protection and secure our rights when our rights are infringed and violated? And how do we access to justice? So this issue is particularly pressing in the remote and the rural areas of Tripura, where much attention is needed. By saying this, I do not mean that urban areas are not without the problems. There generally, in urban areas, there are more efficient administrative setups, easier accessibility, active service providers and stakeholders, and a more advanced mindset and consciousness as compared to those in remote areas. In these rural areas, human rights violations are rampant and mostly unaddressed and unreported, both in the case of civil nature of case as well as criminal nature of case. Tribal women living in poverty with limited education, awareness, are especially more vulnerable and become victims. So during my work, my humanitarian assistant project work, I work with conflict-affected women in the Thalai remote villages of Tripura. I have witnessed the challenges faced by tribal women. In fact, both men and women, so tribal communities, the challenges of tribal communities. So for a tribal woman to voice her concern and report a violation, whether criminal or civil, she must navigate numerous obstacles. There is little to no media attention to bring these issues to light. What I have experienced is that there is a dilemma in deciding whether to approach the police or court directly for redressal when there is a violation or infringement of rights as an indigenous woman. Many tribes in Tripura, still we have our own traditional customary laws, which adjudicates disputes and settle matters within the village level courts, which are overseen by the village head or appointed chaudhry or adjudicator. So these customary laws are binding upon members of a specific community. This forms a social control mechanism which is prevalent within the villages. So in my understanding, justice can be achieved either at the village level through customary laws or through statutory laws in the court. So both are valid avenues. It is not necessary that justice can be obtained solely in the court of law. In fact, court systems presents numerous challenges such as needing influential contacts for assistance, as well as difficulties with the far-flung locations, language barriers, knowledge, accessibility, financial, and lengthy proceedings. So as a tribal women, we have to face these all obstacles to reach to the forum to raise our concerns and issues. On a similar note, as a tribal women, we have the advantage of dual forums for seeking justice and settle the matters where customary laws has jurisdiction. So as a tribal woman, if I am not satisfied with the decision of the village level court, then then it is open to approach the court. It is also important to note that serious criminal offenses are handled by the state and the statutory laws. So now this is a kind of a context how we are. And what concerns me a lot is that despite many being well educated and highly qualified these days, and we are enough qualified to understand rights and distinguish right from wrong. But still there is a tendency to hesitate in fighting back, raising voice, and addressing issues. Often we measure the direct and indirect personal impact, lack confidence, fear potential consequence, and are hindered by social stigmas and taboos. So what is the root cause behind this? It
Right.
could be a deep-rooted feeling of being second-class citizen within the state, marginalized, dominated, and discriminated against, along with the prior bitter negative experiences with the state machinery and judicial systems, resulting in lack of hope and trust in the state machinery and judiciary. So as an indigenous woman, we have rights, but that rights are in someone's hand. So we have to approach and seek justice in a system where uncertainty is very high. So with this, I will conclude here and I will go for the next round. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Romita. It was interesting for me to learn about, I mean, I've seen in other states as well, the issue of customary laws and, the legal mechanism being, two viable routes. But the way you contextualize how this works in Tripura was eye-opening for me. So thank you very much for that. We'll come back, of course, a reminder to everyone that we will have an actual conversation. And we will come back again and again to our speakers. I said again and again because at least twice more. I don't know about more than that. So next we have Dr. Biswendu Bhattacharjee, media scholar, correspondent. He's a media writer, scholar, and environmental activist based in Tripura. Professionally, as I said, he's been a journalist for the last 25 years. He's currently working with the Times of India as correspondent in Tripura. The floor is yours, Biswendu.
Good evening to all of you. There's very good audience and it's a diverse audience. So let me introduce myself that I'm an active journalist and I'm also involved in some social activities, mostly the environmental issues. So the two issues I want to flag here, this what Mr. Venkatesh flagged at the beginning, that what goes wrong with the rest of the world or country is about the misconception and why this is so. The first of all, as a scholar, what I understand that most of the cases, this media reporting are basically based on some objective. So you all are well aware that media is an industry now, and it is a profit-driven industry. So when one entrepreneur comes, why I'm saying entrepreneurs, media is a business now. Entrepreneur comes, he always look at the prospect of market. Here the revenue share from advertisement is very low. That's why this industry is mostly depending on government advertisement. So thereby, my previous speaker, Madam Romita, has pointed out that most of the cases, the most thing getting unreported. Yes, it's true. The most of the cases are unreported because the media professionals, those who are working here, they are this way or other biased to the system. Why they are biased to the system? It is not that they are not understanding. They are very much careful, but since they have accepted as a profession, they have to go by certain rule, what the other business does. Most of the cases in Tripura, it happens, this when something happens in a distant part, I don't say remote because we don't use remote word now, a distant part of the capital, we have to rely on the sources either from police or from a political leader. If we take the consideration of police or any civil service or police service officers, we are getting into the concept that we are just interacting with the government, because he will talk this much or he will share this much of information, whatever is comfortable for him or his government, because he is not going to lose his job or not getting into problem by sharing any information. And even if they share some information, they always say, don't put my name or don't refer the sources. Most of the cases, it is also dangerous because without putting source, sometimes we write also the condition of anonymity or not to be put it like this, but it is a little bit dangerous in that sense, because some delicate issues comes when you cannot rely upon those people. If somebody don't want to be identified himself, and if I rely on him, and tomorrow he may come and he may say, I am not shared this information, it is not my information, then I will be in trouble. So that is the reason why most of the things are getting biased reporting. And second source is the political leaders. The political leaders are also biased to his party or his ideology. So this is a very difficult situation, not only in Tripura, I say the most of the rural part of the India. What I experienced in Punjab, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, even in West Bengal, and in Mizoram also, I find the similar kind of situation is happening. Here, thus my suggestion will be the social interaction and these kind of meetings and this kind of the friendship. Through this boom, I getting connected with some of the scholars, some of the this participants, those who are actually potentially good for understanding the issues or getting some inputs for reporting. So my suggestion would be this: if the if voluntarily someone comes and send or share the stories or the agonies or tell the stories of the sufferings, then it is easy to report. It is not that if I write, nobody is going to carry it across. I have the experience that as a small story I have covered in this place called Jirania. There one 4 years old girl, she was suffering from some kind of peculiar disease where her head become 3 times more than her body weight. What is said is some disease called, I forgot the name. So I reported this story in Times of India, and it was covered in our 13 edition across. Immediately, that family, I got the query. There a lot of people from other part of the country, even mostly from Mumbai, they wanted to contribute that family, that they wanted to help the girl for the treatment. And on the 3rd day, she has been taken to Fortis Hospital, Delhi, by the that person who has come up for that helping that girl, and she was treated. Unfortunately, she could not survive. That is different thing, because it's a critical surgery. She lost. But at least I am confident that if we report something objectively, and if the stories are comes sensitively, then definitely it has an impact. In another context, there is a very complex issue of ethnic issues. What this madam said is that most of the cases, the village level court, means the customary laws are taking care of some issues. If it is not resolved, then they are coming to the court. Here also is a problem that in Tripura, what my understanding goes, the most of the customary laws are not codified, and it has no value in the this formal judicial system. Only I think 2 or 3 customary laws are being codified and being accepted. So this, when any judgment or any decision comes from the this customary court, it is not even going to the consideration by the court. As a result, what happens? This is influenced by sometimes by the money, sometimes by some influential person, sometimes by other forces. So most of the cases, it finds that this entire case lost the values, and if someone come to the court for some justice, it is going to reverse to him or her. Sometimes police become hostile, sometimes the political party becomes hostile, because it is then.
Bishendu, I apologize, but you have about 30 seconds. Actually, time's up. Please finish what it is.
Okay. So this is the situation in the judicial system. If you come to the administrative system is also the flowing in the same way. So this much for now. So if I get the chance, I will share the other thing also the next time. Thank you.
Yes,
sir.
yes. It's almost half past. We've had 25 minutes. We'll finish the first round of speakers, and then we'll hopefully come back to every single one of you. Let's bring in Sunil Kalai. Sunil is a filmmaker, photographer, and a social activist. He's an assistant professor in journalism and mass communication at Tripura University. He's written about indigenous folk cinema in his book, Folk Cinema, Culture and Indigeneity. Sunil, it's over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Venkatesh sir, for introducing me. Well, what I do in and around in my everyday life, that is what I mixed with my academics. So all that I'm going to say or write or teach is what transpired me from my everyday life's practice. Well, today's topic that I'll be sharing with you is about media landscaping, representing the indigeneity. Well, again, when we say indigeneity or indigenous community, there is a whole debate across the world. Who are the legitimate indigeneity? And what constitutes the real meaning of indigeneity? That debate has been going, whether it is in Native America or Aboriginal Australians or to this part of Northeast India. History had been written, it is being rewritten, it has been presented, and now we are going to represent and re-representing our own story through this new media, the digital media. Well, the whole debate of my discussion will emphasize on the redemption of physical reality with the intervention of digital technology. Earlier, prior to the 21st century, if you look at the indigenous representation or the subaltern representation or the tribal representation, it was totally blurred. Why? Whether it is in the print media, whether it is in the visual media, the stories of the have-not had not been written. And even the cinema that were made in Bollywood or Hollywood were always in the form of an exotic representation of high and the elite culture. So the marginalized section had always been not represented. But today, what we have seen in the last few decades, can we really rely on media? That was a big question. There is a debate where Romita was speaking and Biswendu is speaking. The mainstream media never represented us. There is the opinion and the feelings and the experience they will be finding from most of the minorities and the marginalized sections of our society in our nation. Why is it so? Because the very mass media had been working as a money media, and they were not for the masses. They were for those people who have the money and for those people who want to earn through media. So mass media had shifted its paradigm shift from a merely mass media to the money media. And who owns them? The big company like Viacom, the Jio, and we all know that. And who controls the nation and the world? Is needless to say, who controls? It is the information that controls. And who owns the information? The big business owners. Now, how do we do that? But it's very interesting. They said we were never being represented. We were stripped out of our land. We were deprived of our gods and languages. We were even brought alcohol and venereal diseases. These are the things which every indigenous community, whether it is the real Indians or in Asia, they have felt that. And after all the plunder, they want to create our image or construct us as those criminals, as those militants, or those uncivilized. And in the name of civilization, many policies are being made and many tribal rights are being taken away. But does the mainstream media represent? I doubt. Partly maybe, but not fully. Now, coming back to this myth-making, image-making, and cultural making, it is today the intervention of digital technology which has invited all the individuals to own their own blogs through YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. This has really empowered each individual citizen of the whole world, including the tribal and the indigenous community, to represent themselves. So in the next part of my session, I'll be talking about the rest of the new digital video practices through cinema. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunil. One of the things, if we get the time later on today, I want to find out for myself is how you use the word indigeneity and how that differs from the use of indigenous. And I'm sure there's a difference because I do know that words are important, and I do realize that correct framing is important. So we'll come to that maybe if we have time. Let's bring in Thomas Malsong, who's a PhD scholar at Northeastern Hill University, Shillong. His primary research interests include community development, extractivism, resource governance, and political ecology. Thomas, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everyone. And I really appreciate boomlive for giving me this opportunity to speak on my native land, Tripura. So what I will be speaking, I have a bit of a note, so maybe perhaps I'll try to speak a bit faster. So I'll speak on the current situation of the state-led research extraction project, which is a hydrocarbon, or you call it natural gas extraction, that have intruded on the forest and natural resources, affecting adversely tribal communities' rights, and also the political implications of controlling forest or the natural resources and the impact on the communities, as well as the ecological, forest, and environment sustainability. This is imperative because this issue is rarely addressed, even in the political campaigns or even in academics per se, when it comes to Tripura. Just like the forested areas of Northeast, which are rich in forest trees, biodiversity, natural resources, which are routinely exploited, sold, leased, and simply plundered or polluted by the government and the private companies. And whenever the indigenous tribal communities defenders, they voice out, they face violence, or they're put in jail, or when they, especially when they try to protect their land. And many times, because of these state-led interventions, the tribals are uprooted or displaced from their ancestral land, and regularly they're cut off from the resources or which are, pretty much vital to their livelihood. So situation like this is pretty much evident in Tripura, especially a recently operated extensive exploration extraction of natural resources, primarily where indigenous tribals are settling, which led to widespread deforestation, ecological degradation, and violation of tribal communities' rights that have also intensified the socioeconomic issues of the tribals in Tripura. However, Tripura is a very small forested area, a hilly state of the northeast state, and many times, due to its mountainous nature of geographical location, many commercial or industrial projects are known to be unfeasible or cannot be carried out. However, the extraction projects are not new to Tripura. Certainly, this began with the forest extraction, mainly in the early post-independence when Tripura merged with the Indian state. The forest of Tripura has faced since, very pretty bad pressure from various factors. Some factors could be like state-led development interventions, which is in the form of a hydropower project, which is well known as a Gumati Dam, and we have infrastructure development like road expansion, and which is still carried out forest extraction through agroforestry plantations. Now, of course, these programs are carried out under the pretext of developments. However, the issue of deforestation are rarely discussed and often treated as if it is not important, except on Environment Day, it is remembered, or afforestation project drives takes place along with some multinational corporations like JICA or Indo-German projects, but their effectiveness is questionable because the outcome, it appears very impressive only in government reports. But in reality, the hill areas reveal a dying forest, which I often compare with a person losing their hair once it began. It's very difficult to bring it back. So these, but lately, a massive state-led resource extraction project, which continue to intrude the forest areas that have turned the entire commonly shared components of natural resources into a mere commodities, subjected to a systematic extraction and control by powerful private extractive corporations. These extraction projects have led to extensive deforestation, and what I would say here, it also have contributed to climate change that is adversely impacting the everyday life of the hill tribals. Now, when it talks about governance, policies, laws, Tripura is filled with many policies, many laws, many protective measurements. I would like to flag off here, mainly we have the ADC 6 schedules and mainly the Forest Rights Act, which aim to undo the historical injustice which is done to the tribals through land alienation. However, the relationship between policy decision and the actual practices frequently allocates plentiful benefits to only powerful groups, mostly corporate sector, state, and their local political agents, while already marginalized forest-dependent tribal communities are left with resource scarcity and violation of their rights. And of course, these policies rather it perpetuate state control. Now, just before I end here, I want to say the extraction actually it began around 1975 in Tripura, but large scale operation which have not taken much because report indicates that the mineral or the hydrocarbon resources in Tripura are not mature enough for extraction. And recently, those extraction projects are essentially a trial to determine whether these resources are ready for full-scale extraction or not. And when I talk about the community rights, the tribal communities who own FRA don't even have a negotiation space to even put a price for their own land. And now these projects now it is happening in some villages and it stopped sort of, but it will begin again because what the corporate is doing, it's harvesting the natural resources. And the newly amended Forest Conservation Amendment Act, which is expected to facilitate more extraction projects by extractive corporation, leading to increased forest exploitation. So with this few notes, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thomas, that was 5 minutes and 55 seconds. You feared you'd be over, but actually you're
Yes,
not.
yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah, thank you.
But it was good. It was good to hear for me personally to know a little bit about the tensions between needs of indigenous people there and tribal people, and what's going on with extractivism. So that was very useful for me. Thanks. Let's get in Biswaranjan Tripura now, who teaches indigenous and tribal studies at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. He earned his PhD in International Development Studies from the Institute of Development Research and Development Policy in Germany. I don't know how to pronounce the university's name actually, Biswaranjan, so maybe you can tell us how to do that. But the floor is yours.
You can, yeah, you can pronounce the Roe University Bochum.
Okay.
Okay.
Good to know.
So, all right. So good evening, everybody. And thank you to boomlive and the Northeast Network for inviting me for this particular talk. And I say this is a very important talk at this crucial stage where all of us are discussing on Northeast around the country, and Northeast is around, again, back to the focus in that sense. So since in the latter part of my talk, I will be allowed to speak more. So now probably I will speak a little more generic and go into a little hint to what I'm going to speak a later time, you know, when I would be given a more time to speak. So I have been working for almost a decade now, especially in the area of tribal studies, or what might call it as indigenous studies, if you were to see it from a global context. So having read in the course of my exercise in academic, and especially in the course of my PhD, especially 150 years of tribal studies, right from Ascetic Society of Bengal, if one were to relate. So what I see is that there are two things that mostly the studies often is being conducted on tribes in India, both if you look at it during the time of British colonialism, as well as in the post-colonialism, especially in the post-India's independence. So it's important to kind of look into what is the dominant debates that has come into understanding this particular category. One thing is how even Dr. Sunil and others have said that how the tribes and indigenous community has been perceived scholarly, has been like almost like an exotic, savage, uncivilized. You know, there are a lot of many other words that one would not like to even pronounce. You know, there are a lot of even people like Malinowski, who is being seen as one of the greatest person who has, you know, when participatory observation came into being around the world and people saw it, it's like almost like a gold mine, you know, especially in the area of methodology. But later on, we know what exactly happened in his book, you know, in his diary. So one can see, so also in the same case, if you look into the studies on tribes by British colonialism, we have seen how tribes have been seen as very exotic. There are a lot of books like The People of India, you know, where it uses methodology like anthropometric, where it measures the color of your hair, the color of your skin, how tall you are, how short you are, and all of this seems to be like a pseudo-scientific, you know, in my understanding. So like this, even if you move into the post-India's independence, you see a lot of dominant communities who also started studying tribes almost from the same kind of gaze. So what then in the course of my academic, you know, readings and thinking and reflecting and writing, what I have come to realize is that, you know, often we talk in anthropology about the question of insider and outsider. So I see that the notion of insider and outsider, which we speak in anthropological language, is to some extent is a colonial. You know, we have to go beyond inside and outside. Anybody can do research on any community. You know, it's a scientific exercise, provided how do you do it? You know, so what is important is your frame of reference. So what is your intention of doing research? You know, often if you read at books like Linda Smith, who is often known as one of the prominent in decolonizing methodology, where you say, many tribes anywhere you go in the country often also see and experience that, doing research on tribes is being seen as one of the dirtiest word or dirtiest experiences, almost like this. So then in the course of my PhD, when I was doing it, research, then I went with a very typical way of, mainstream kind of a methodology on ethnography. I went to Tripura, then I realized that what is most important in doing research is a methodology has to be congruent with the lives of people that you're doing research. So it's about the being and doing, about so it's about the ontology and epistemology and the methodology of the people, how you engage with them. So while I was doing research, then something I kind of wrote, which is also published in a form of a paper, I started not exactly challenging, the dominant ethnography, but kind of engaging scholarly with them. So I kind of uses the word like, engage observation in opposed to what we call as participatory observation. And I was also referring to some of the concept like conversational method. And another interesting thing, that one concept that I came across is I developed is through my methodology is sitting around the fire. So, in the midst of the winter time, when I was doing a research, doing my ethnography study for almost like 10 months to 12, almost a year in Tripura. And I see in the winter, often when we start to interact with people in the village, there seems to be running away sometimes. So the only thing that I realize is I see in the winter, everybody is sitting around the fire, So that was the time in the winter that where I could interact with people. So then that was the time that I thought, let me call this method as sitting around the fire, where I sit down with people around the fire, around in the kitchen. And that was the time that I could kind of interact with people, in my field. So can I go on with one more minute?
Yes, we actually completely out of time, but if you'll take 1 minute, finish it off.
Yes, 1 minute. So what I would conclude that there are two concepts that I would emphasize when anybody who does research on tribes or indigenous communities. One is, especially in the context of India, one has to abide with the concept on something what I call it as decast. You have to decast your mind, and the second point that I would say is decolonizing the mind. When I say decolonizing mind is moving out of that, universal particular frame of reference and listening to people's voices that are congruent to people. And also it's very important that we have to decast ourselves from, and from what anybody who belongs to certain kind of a dominant caste community. So it's important to recognize that tribes are not as caste, but tribes as non-caste society. So I end here. Probably in the next part of my lecture, then I could speak more.
I was just going to ask you what is meant by decast, but you explained towards the end. So yeah, that would have been, that's very good for me to know as well. We'll come back to you, of course. Let's go to RK Dev Burma. We have just 2 more speakers, and then our introductory round is over, which actually is the most important round in a way, because we are all getting to know each other. Let's try and finish this introductory round, 2 more speakers by 7 o'clock, so we can get into a short discussion on what we get wrong about Tripura, and then your questions and answers as well. So on that note, it's over to RK Dev Burma, who teaches at the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Guwahati. He writes on space, place, and politics in Northeast India. Over to you, RK.
Actually, my talk is titled as Other Ways of Talking About Tripura. 2 years of teaching, online during COVID has already traumatized me with online interactions. So, but I'll try to, short in my presentation. Now, I'm doing 2 things today. The first is I want to look at after my PhD in 2012, when I began teaching, it came across this idea of brand mind circle, right? The former Chief Minister of Tripura, who's from the left. And I'll be talking about how the branding of Manik Sarkar as the purest and non-corrupt chief minister in India has reduced to silence other ways of talking about Tripura. That's my first part of the conversation. The second, which I'll do in the second part, would be about now we hear across Northeast India, right? You hear in Meghalaya, in Assam, in Nagaland, in Manipur, that we don't want to become like another Tripura. There's a dominant slogan that you hear in these other states. And I want to look at how we can talk about Tripura differently than how they are framing Tripura. Okay, so the first part is this, right? Let me begin with one tragic comic case from Tripura in, I think, 2012 or 13. I think Sunil might remember the incident where the government under Manik Sarkar then, put up a sculpture of Tagore in Agartala, right?
Yes.
And immediately people saw the sculpture and said, this resembles more like a Marx than Tagore, right? And there's a complaint from the public in Agartala saying, no, this is not Tagore. This is more like a Karl Marx. So they had to remove the statue and drag away the statue. And it appeared to me that this is interesting. It's sort of a symbolic of how under the left front government in Tripura, right, you couldn't tell whether they are communist or a settler, right? And in a sense, I thought there was a tragicomedy in a sense what Manik Sarkar had become in Tripura. So that brand Manik Sarkar reduced to silence other ways of talking about Tripura at that time. So in most of my writings, I try to bring in these other ways of talking about Tripura. The first I focused on was the militarization under Manik Sarkar. When he became the chief minister, I think in 1998, within 3 years or 4 years of his term, he raised 6 battalions of TSR, right, the Tripura State Rifle. And that is a record in a sense that here is a chief minister who is seen as left and non-corrupt, but he was willing to raise Tripura State Rifles who were known for committing acts of violence against tribals in Tripura. So here outside Tripura, the violence committed by the tribal armed groups all over outside Tripura, but the violence that the TSR commits on burning houses, raising down villages that you hardly hear of. The second is this interesting case of how at that time the left-hand government made a huge thing about building the most modern and the biggest jail in Northeast India in Agartala. So they built this jail and then celebrated it, saying that this is the most modern and biggest jail in Northeast India. And I was appalled by it because you hear in this celebration that this is a place where we will correct tribal minds. In fact, in the governor's speech, the governor at the time announced that this is where we're going to correct tribal minds. And shockingly, for those who are working with the NGOs at that time, would tell about how in all the jails in Tripura, the tribals outnumbered the non-tribals. You look at the tribals are about 27% of the population, but they represent more in the jails, these incarcerations. And that tells a story about how actually the other ways of talking about Tripura was silenced during that raid. The third that I remember that I kept telling in my writings was how Manik Sarkar tried to erase the memorials and historical spaces of Tripura by, for example, renaming of places in Agartala, right? You find that a place like, the museum, the or as were being renamed by the government as a way to erase the Manikia past. Right? And this is where I think the movement for Kokborok emerged at that time. I remember led by Vikas Rai and others who led this movement for Kokborok. They demand that Kokborok has to be written in a script, Roman script other than Bengali script. So you find that this movement became the basis of what the Tripura Land movement that I think Amresh will talk about. But for me, the movement is based on anger, based on rage against this denial of a script. It's a very limited way of understanding Tripura, because what the government, the state has been doing in Tripura is to deny a language in a broader sense of how to conceptualize, how to articulate your resistance against this this wannabe settler state that Tripura has become over the past few decades, right? And that language, that articulation has to be more than demanding for a script, more than demand for a right to a mother tongue. This is a language that we need, that would question and challenge and resist the wannabe settler state that Tripura has become. So this were the concern that I dealt with in my writings over the past 1 decade, which brings me to my second, that, and I'll deal with it in the second part of the conversation. But just a quick note of what I'm going to do in that second part is that the premise that we don't want to become another Tripura in Mizoram, in other parts of Northeast India. They're right about the history of demography. But I think what they get wrong about it is about the kind of politics such a slogan brings in or inserts in our body politics, and that assumptions are actually troubling for me. And I'll be looking at that in the second part. Thank you.
Intriguingly set up for us, RK. Thank you for that. And you mentioned, Vikas Rai. So we have him actually. So Vikas Rai Debbarma is a veteran author and social activist. And, we wanted to come to him earlier itself, but I think he joined 10 minutes later. He's the president of Roman script for Kokboro Choba. So each of us, Vikas, we've been speaking for 3 to 4 minutes. So it's your turn now. And after this, let's move into the second phase of today's conversation. And in the second phase of this conversation, I'm going to ask you all, what we get wrong about Tripura, and maybe I can come back to Amaresh to kickstart that second leg of this discussion. But for the moment, it's over to you, Vikas. And we probably have to do an audio check as well. Let's see if that works.
Good evening to you all.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. So it was a nice discussion. I'm sorry I couldn't join in time because of some other engagement. So I won't take too much time. My question to all the participants here and the listeners of this Boom Live is that it is observed that instead of implementing the slogan given in NEP 2020, where it is saying that mother tongue should be the medium of instruction for teaching the tribal languages, at least up to class 5, and wherever it is possible, up to class 8. But surprisingly, it is observed that many of the state governments, including the Tripura government, they are shifting, the focus somewhere else. These days, another idea is getting, they're trying to make it popularized. That is the education, multilingual education. And they're working a lot on multilingual education. And as far as I understand, the concept of multilingual education, it came into existence in the European countries to accommodate the migrants, mainly from the Asian countries. So my question is whether multilingual education system can replace the education to mother tongue. I'd like to request all the participants here to think over it, because I don't think that multilingual education can replace the education to mother tongue, because the education to mother tongue, it makes the students connected with their own roots, their own traditions, their ethnicities, etc. Which education so concept of multilingual education cannot do. So with this question, I'd like to conclude for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vikas. I mean, the whole idea of linguistic education for in different languages. It is something we grapple with in southern India as well, but of course, the whole dimensions are completely different, and the whole idea of which script to use. I find that I want to learn more about this, more about the issue. So thank you for that. And with that, we've concluded the first round. It's it's exactly 7 o'clock. So we'll try to finish in half an hour. But right now, what I will do is I'll invite you all to start the guests who have come to attend, that is, to start writing your questions in the chat box, because I want to get to as many questions as possible. But as you do that, let's talk about the other thing we wanted to talk about, which is what do we get wrong about Tripura? When I say we, I mean, of course, me from other parts of India, either other states in the Northeast or the mainland of India. Or when I say we, I also refer to people outside of India as well. What do we get wrong about Tripura? So let's start this. And I said that, I will go to Amaresh. From Amaresh, let's get to Thomas. And Thomas, after Thomas, let's go to Romita on this.
Sir, I'll just dive into the previous conversation. Actually, I got confused.
Yeah, so, you know what? But Amaresh, you know what? Let's get to that a little later, because let's talk about this. We'll come back to you as soon as we finish this round.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Actually, you know what? I changed my mind again, like in the middle. Go for it. Try to finish what you were trying to say in 3 minutes and answer that question of what we get wrong about Tripura as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
The problem is that we do not get to study the subject of history of our own state. For example, we get to study the history of Shivaji, Tipu Sultan, but in the syllabus, it is not mentioned in the Tripura syllabus that it has no connection with the Tripura. Of course, it has Shivaji, Tipu Sultan, they has contributed a lot, but it has no connection with Tripura. And the second thing is that the media, actually the media base, there are some medias are biased when and who gets destroyed. It is very difficult to get the truth because of some media bias. These are some which I want to add.
Got it. Got it. And what did you want to talk about in your introductory remarks, Amrish?
Oh, I was confused. I thought I have to give my first introduction, then the second round shall be on my topic.
Yeah, it's not an easy, it's very natural, you know, it's not an easy format. So why don't you speak now? And
Okay,
then
okay.
Yeah.
I think most of the attendees have watched the Avatar movie, science fiction movie, a place called Pandora, inhabited by Navi indigenous people. So you can see how the human security accompanied by RTA have destroyed the history, ecosystem, knowledge system that pertains to epistemicide. Although it was a real movie, but you can relate and reflect what I'm going to portray in the discussion. So as far as Tripura movement or separate state demand is concerned in the state, we have to go to a little earlier, understand the phases and the transition of tribal movement and the background. So basically, it was the princely state for more than 300 years. It was known as Hill Tripura during the British rule. Before joining with the Indian Union, Tripura was in a crisis situation, having its own internal tension and problem. And it further got aggravated with the sudden demise of Maharaja Bir Bikram on 17 May 1947. And it has also conspiracy to merge with East Pakistan by Ghidu Mia with the existence of Nobel-like Royal Dujay. So as a result, the Regent Maharani Kanchan Preven Devi signed the instrument of accession on 13 August 1947 and merger agreement on 1949. Initially, it became a proxy state in 1950, Territorial Council in 1956, and unitary in 1963, and achieved full statehood on 21st January 1972. Though the kings are tribals, the Maharaja was very generous and humble towards his subject, irrespective of caste, tribe, ethnicity, or any group. For example, by rehabilitating the settlers or the refugees. For example, you take the case of Bengal famine of 1940, Noakhali riot of 1946, and as a response to this, the Regent Kancha Prava Devi allocated 1,000 drones across of length to refugee settlers. Moreover, the state of Tripura received massive influx of Bengali-speaking immigrants from East Pakistan in the wake of partition and in the aftermath of the Indo-Pak War 1971. It is interesting to note that after the final wave of 1971, the total population of the state Tripura was 15.56 lakh, while the refugees were 13.52 lakh. So with demographic complexity, the host tribal began to experience marginalization, language issue, plus exploitation from the money lenders, from land grabbing from the illiterate tribe. So these are some of the events, the effect of demographic explain. And coming to the tribal movements, so the earliest tribal organized collective movement began in 1945 with the formation of Jana Shiksha Samiti with the objective of spreading mass education. Then you have GMP movement that could be seen as social reform movement. Several initiatives like prohibition of child marriage, discouraging polygamy system, gender equality. The movement at this stage have the support of Bengali community, linkage with left political parties. And the second is the emergence of ethno nationalist tribal-centric movement. For example, the birth of TGS in 1967 and then TSF in 1968. This marked the beginning of identity politics in the state of Tripura. Their demands were restriction of inherited land, introduction of corporate language, and the most important is deportation of illegal immigrants. There's a famous slogan, we are neither Congress nor left, we are for tribal cause. This movement has started as an alternative to the left and the Congress. So the TGS and the TSF left tribal movement became more vocal and so the increasing of gulf between the tribal and non-tribal, making it exclusive. Then you have insurgency phase of tribal movement. From the late 1960s, Tripura tribal politics underwent a radical transformation. So after TGS, armed insurgency group emerged with an objective to have Tripura land, with demand ranging from secession to separate state within the Indian Union. Some prominent insurgent group like Sankara, TNP, ATTF, and LFT. Then we have the emergence of tribal-centric political parties.
Amrish, is it possible for you to wrap this up in about a minute or so now?
Yes, yes, sir.
Because it is interesting for us to know a little bit about the history of Tripura and the movements and the right movements. So we are also short on time, however.
So my concluding observation is that tribal movements, including Tripura and demand, are rooted in demographic. This unabated influx of refugees from Bangladesh reduced the tribals to a minority in their own land. This demographic marginalization has had a multidimensional effect. In democracy, this demographic marginalization translates into political marginalization or loss of control or influence over state power. As such, identity-based movement with demands ranging from political autonomy to separate statehood became pervasive in Tripura. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Amrish. I mean, your point about demographic marginalization leading to political marginalization is very well received because it is something we don't know. We don't know much about, rather. We know a little bit about, we have a clue. And to all our panelists, I just want to say, 4 to 6 minutes is just not enough to do you all justice and to do your work justice. But we are fighting against, the resource of time resource, dwindling time resource. So I apologize for cutting you short for that reason. Let's get back into that question about what we get wrong about Tripura. Let's go to Thomas, and then from there to Romita, and from Romita to Vishwaranjan.
Yeah, thank you so much. My network Wi-Fi a bit unstable, so in case if I in the middle I go off, so I apologize. So actually there are many things to talk about, to rectify, when it comes to clearing the misunderstanding about the state of Tripura. But what I will mention only few points which related to what I have spoken earlier. So the first thing is that, when it comes to recently some tribal peoples were arrested just because they protested against, resource extraction project development projects. But what happens is that when such things happen, the state always labels also some of the academic writings. If you look, they always label as a insurgent group sort of, that is pretty much, I think, not only in Tripura, but I think the whole Northeast that takes place. But in Tripura, that is, we know that's an issue, but then when it comes to anything, this is sort of a, it's label. And the second thing that I want to talk about is that about the 6 schedules, how it really functions in Tripura. Everybody knows, everybody thinks that 6 schedules is a very pretty good, a strong law which protects indigenous from all sort of issues. In fact, many times, even currently what is happening in Manipur, some of my friends ask me that we're also demanding sort of thing, how it really functions, I think very, I said, no, our 6 schedule is just a welfare project. I told them, it's just a welfare project, nothing. Because you talk about, when you look the rules, the guidelines of the 6 schedules and the ADC, it pretty much very strong actually, but in practical, that's very different. The tribals, they can't do anything. It's the state controls everything. So that is the one thing. And the third, I was talking about the Forest Right Act. So this is pretty much, I really like this case because when it comes to Tripura, in any of the development indicators, Tripura always top, always the either in a first rank, second rank, third rank. So when it comes to Forest Right Act, that is Forest Forest Right Act, which gives land entitlement, which is known as land patta, to the tribals. And if you look the data in Tripura, we are the third land distributions actually in terms of we were given a land. But when it comes to resource extraction, we cannot do anything. We cannot. So this is another, I think, misunderstanding that we have. And of course, when it comes to deforestation, the Jumias are always blamed. They are called as environment destroyers. Even if you look, the government reports, you'll find old records, new records. It's always been blamed the tribals that the Jum cultivators are the destroyers. So I think this is a very wrong, because when it comes to deforestation, we have many factors. You talk about settlement, you talk about population explosion, talk about rehabilitation, talk about defense security, urbanization, administration, waste disposals, and of course we also have rubber plantation, break claims, and other like resource extraction, which are not at all done any assessment. So this is another one. And lastly, I want to talk about that is when it comes to Tripura, tribals are mainly seen as a beneficiaries. Who are the beneficiaries? Who just wait for the money. They have no any contribution. This is what sort of people perceive actually. But no, as Sister Romita rightly pointed out, in village level, there are customary communities who looks after, actually they want to negotiate, but that negotiation space is never given to them. And lastly, the green economy. The green economy is something in Tripura through agroforestry plantations. If you read any of the government reports, we are well doing, but in reality, it's different. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thomas. Romita, what do we get wrong about Tripura?
Yes, I will be very specific to my interest area. There is a presumption that uniform law would be better to ensure the rights of indigenous tribal women in Tripura, especially concerning to marriage, property, divorce, etc. So at the same time, the idea of uniform civil code itself is a very good. It's very good, and it may be ideal, and it may be very appropriate for some section and some places. However, if you look in Tripura with prevalent customary laws, which settles matters such as family law, integral property disputes, and minor issues within the local community, which is very much prevalent in Tripura. So I come from a society, I myself is a young, and we have a customary systems. So although I'm from legal background, but I'm obliged to my customary systems within my village. So that is how we are being taught and how we are being socially educated. And these customary laws, as I mentioned earlier also, it do not apply on the serious criminal cases. So what I would say is that Tripura is a sixth scheduled state with functional autonomous council that ensures autonomy, self-governance, and right to self-determination and judicial systems. So whether the promise is fulfilled as per the provisions of sixth schedule. That is again another significant topic to be discussed, and I hope in this panel, our next panel will throw highlight on this as well. And also what I heard from our previous co-panel, he has mentioned about the codification. So in fact, I come from the village where I have seen how traditional customary law functions. And it is what the right question is being put up, like what people get wrong. So many people believe that codification is necessary in order to be recognized as law. Whereas, as from a legal background, I would say that custom has been the source of law. And in fact, before Constitution came into being, custom practices, customary law has been already prevalent. So we have been living with it. As I said earlier, customary laws has been a mechanism for a social control within the local level. However, by saying that, I doesn't mean that I would also emphasize that the customary law provisions governing women's rights should be revisited. Yes, there is a need to be revisited, and if necessary, aligned with the constitutional principles, because it varies from place, because the implementation or the practice varies from place to place, and it is an unwritten law. So many a times there go lapse, there can be a biased decisions. But however, having said that, that doesn't mean that we cannot hypothetically conclude that these laws and practices are derogatory and violative. And if we say that this is a derogatory and violative of women's rights, it could be incorrect at this juncture. So with this, I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Romita. Definitely a lot of food for thought. Thank you for that. So we have a slight dilemma. It's 7:23 in the evening, or is it what? 7:20 almost in the evening. It's going to be dinner time, but we still have a lot of people yet to speak. We have 60 people who are still listening. So I'm assuming interest is high. So I just want to announce that I am willing to carry this conversation on for much longer.
I think there are a lot of questions, so better take the
Lot of
questions.
questions.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
let's get to the questions.
because both
We will get to
Thomas and Robert have covered what you get
Yeah.
on about Tripura, then we can do the
Yeah.
questions directly.
Let's get to the questions. I was going to get to the questions. But there are some of these questions, for example, Mahesh has asked a question directly to Vishwaranjan. So wherever there is a direct question, just to save time, I request the panelists to probably type in an answer right there and then. And then we will take non-specific questions to generic, panel members. But I'd invited Vishwaranjan to speak about what we get wrong about Tripura. So finish that, Vishwaranjan, and then we'll take a few questions, and then we'll finish off everyone else, what they have to say.
Yeah. So thank you for the second round for these opportunities again. I hope we have a little more time, but since okay, you can see, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. I was saying, I hope we have a little more time to discuss more on the topic, but since we have a little time, so let me just give some of my reflection on the actual topic, what I'm supposed to talk on. So Omris has covered, and Romita and Thomas has covered somewhere on the history part. So if I reflect on the history of Tripura, what I would look at it as calling it as dialogical historical approach. If I look at it from that sense, so I see three most important, what I call it as a concrete conditions of the Prasa people in Tripura. So one, the first point that I see is on land alienation and the restoration. The second is on governance and autonomy, and the third is on the politics of language and script, which our senior has already spoken, because they has spoken about it in a bit. So since I don't have a lot of time, so let me not actually dwell more into detail on that. I have actually attempted to write this in my book, in my forthcoming book with Rotless, which however, I will get into actual what I want to propose, recognizing these concrete conditions of the Prasa people, historically. So I would like to propose some policy implication. So that would cover one question that somebody has asked on Tripura land movement. I don't have a direct answer to it, but but we are in a democratic state, so it's important how we look into from a democratic state perspective as well. So I divide this policy implication into two parts. One is on the socio-political life and the socio-cultural life. So for socio-political life, that I would see is since the discussion on separate state, the discussion on autonomy, there has been a lot of discussion around that. So I think it's important that, revisiting the idea of semi-autonomous, more autonomy or separate state should be kind of, discussed and, having dialogue with, guided with the principle of mutual dialogue and respect. And what I would see it as like what you call as a pluriversal kind of a dialogue. Second point is that the inclusion of tribal village, there are a lot of tribal villages that are not included in the autonomous district council territory as of now. Even our friend Amresh de Burma, even his village is not covered in the district council. So like his village, there are a lot of other villages that that is not covered. So I see that should be covered in the district council. And the third I would see is that alienated tribal ancestral land should be restored. I have looked at a lot of readings on, say, this SC/ST report of the commission that also says, that the land has to be restored. There are around 27 petitions on the land alienation. Around that, from 27, 6,757 acres have been physically restored. And in my field work, I have also seen that a lot of people who were told that the land will be restored, but that land will not be given. And the fourth reflection is that there is something called Article 343M, which there's a village committee that is that has been operated in the village council. So whereas in Meghalaya, 343 allows that the customary village system should function, but whereas in the case of Tripura, the customary village system, whereas it the Panchayat Raj institution function in the in the case of Tripura. So there's a kind of confusion whether you follow it village committee or whether you follow it Panchayat Raj institution. So some point of conversion should happen, and some reflection around this 343M of the Indian Constitution should be thought of. And the point on CAA, often CAA, what we see is actually, I see it's an inclusion of the Hindu and the exclusion of the Muslim. That's basically the CAA. But whereas in the case of Tripura, they are neither Hindu, they are neither Muslim, right? So what about their religion? Does their religion matters in this kind of case? So I see that CAA in a way should be exempted in Tripura, where the mainstream India is not being able to understand what CAA actually means when it comes to the Northeast India and in specific to Tripura. So when I reflect on the socio-cultural life, I'll just take one more minute. I think I have no time more. So I have 3 points to discuss there. The first point is that, Kokborok movement has been going on for a long decades of time. Our senior Vikas Rai knows about this. He was part of it. He was actually part of the history. So Kokborok should be recognized under 8th schedule now. And another point is that, the identity, history, culture, folktale, tribal history should be integrated in the school curriculum, along with the Northeast and the mainstream India history. Third, the last point that I would say is a special care must be taken to preserve the monuments, heritage, archives, sacred areas, forests, original native names, with due respect. Exactly what Dr. RK was talking about, most of the names, even the fieldwork that I had done my fieldwork during my PhD in Ganda Sara. Even the Ganda Sara is it's a colonized name, right? So by the time I finished my fieldwork, the state started announcing that Ganda Sara should be named as Ganda Tisha. By the time that I started writing a book now, when I submitted my thesis, at the time when I submitted my thesis, it was announced. So I had to completely change my thesis before I submit, from Ganda Sara into Ganda Tisha, So that's the kind of colonialism that has actually pierced into this particular society that has to be completely into. This is why something coming from. Okay, that has to be completely, you know, I do consider that there has to be coexistence between different communities, but that coexistence has to come only with mutual respect and dialogue. Probably the dialogue also should take place from not only by the tribal, the dialogue also should happen by the non-tribal as well. But with an understanding that all kinds of epistemology should be able to survive together, not treating one epistemology as dominant than the other epistemology. So that's what I would call it as coexisting.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
thank you for those remarks. I request you to reply on text if you can to some of the questions specifically directed to you. But let's get in. RK, I want to come to you a little later, but let's get in. Sunil has agreed to answer these questions. Sunita asks a question: can someone throw the light on land their rights and respect? So Sunil, if you can take that, then we can go to a couple of more questions that I will bring up, and then we will try wrapping things up.
Actually, when regards to the land ownership pattern or the issues of land, that is what the whole core demand and the movement of the ideology of the greater Tripura land movement or the separate state, demand of the separate state is going on. And all the present situation that we are talking about are all post-merger agreements between Tripura and the princely state of Tripura and India. But we forget the fact about 17th century's history, 18th century's history. Now, the laws and rules and regulations, how the laws of the land are being framed, are always subjective to the particular people concerned. But how much of this is being taken when it comes to the minority community? That is still the big debate. But yes, when we talk of customary laws, when we talk of codifying the customary laws, when we talk of inclusions of the language in the 8th schedule or 6th schedule, a language is a language. The rules that particular community follows is a rule at that point of time. And all these rules and regulations and the law of the land are very much new. I think we need to relook at all these issues and have a bigger debate and discussions. So in a short, it is very difficult to answer this.
Indeed, I mean, I would say that is the case with more such complex questions. I want RK to weigh in on this question. RK, what do we get wrong about Tripura? And then I'll pick out a few more questions for the others.
Well covered by Thomas in his brief period he has covered, but just two quick comments from my side is that you hear about claims that in other states that we don't want to become another Tripura, right? And what they get wrong about this statement is quite troubling, because what this means is that no one should become a minority like the tribals in Tripura, right? But minorities are facts of political life, right? You cannot have a state without minorities, right? So the idea that you can have a separate state also means you'll have minority within that separate new state. What do you do about the minorities? Do you have an answer? If you have the answer, then why demand a separate state? Yeah. So this idea of separation brings in really troubling politics in Tripura and in a region, and we get wrong about this way of framing politics. Secondly, what we get wrong is when you claim that we don't want to become another Tripura. The question is, you as a dominant group in Assam, Nagaland, Manipur, what have you done to the minorities that you're scared of becoming a minority in your state?
Got it. Okay. Well taken, the points. So let's look at these some of these questions. Someone has asked, Sunandita has asked a question, Deep Burma has asked a question about generally how to counter misinformation presented at national level citing the recent tragic case of the youth in Gandachera, sorry. And anyone here wants to specifically talk about misinformation, how to tackle misinformation about this? Meanwhile, Amaresh has replied to Ridugunjan Deka's question. So we'll also copy and paste some of these questions for answers for our own benefit. Okay, so that is one question that is there. I mean, you know, we do have some people who have not spoken enough. For example, Vikas Roy, who has not spoken enough, I feel, because he came late as well, and a few others. So, Vikas, do you have anything specific to say?
Thank you for giving me opportunity for the second time. Yes, there are a lot more to speak, but in the same time, we have to consider the time constraint also. So time is not allowing us.
Yes, yes. But you and I want you to speak, sir, and Biswendu as well, and then we will see if we can wrap up. Yeah.
Yeah. I will confine on this language issue. You know, Kokborok, though had been what to say recognized as state language since 1979. The state issue, you know very well, is still unsolved. That hasn't been resolved here. And the people's mandate, what peoples have given, is being ignored by the government from a chauvinistic point of view, I should say. Not only that, a few minutes before I had asked the question, I put forth a question to all the participants that now what we are observing is government is taking the multilingual education system instead of introducing Fogborog as medium of instruction up to class 5 and wherever it is possible up to class 8. This is another set of examples how the state government is trying to, what to say, trying the development of this Fogborog language. Because, you see, had it been the medium of instruction up to class 5 or class 8,
those school educational institutions
have much more bonding with their own culture, own language, and everything. And these days, what we are observing, lot of private schools are booming, not only in the rural, urban areas, but
the
and the students starting in class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if we overhear the conversation made between themselves, they used to talk a peculiar language we can't understand. They speak like a pigeon English or something like that. Only the Kokborok syntax is being used. The verbs sometimes are from English or from Hindi. Adverbs are from Hindi, from English, something like that. So this will going to destroy our language within 5 to 10 years if the things are not changed. So we are very much concerned about all these things. And I think government should take the matter very seriously, and also the political leaders. My humble urge to the political leaders, may it be Tripura Mosa or IPFC or CPIM or Congress or the BJP, that whenever there is a language issue and speech issue, they should come out from their party ideology and speak from the core of their heart. So this is what I'd like to say
Okay, sir.
for this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate what you've been able to tell us, and we've learned so much from this last 1 hour and 42 minutes. So one person more, I will ask for a comment and 2 questions. So 1 comment and 2 questions. That's all we have the time for. I'll leave the questions for the end. Bishwet, who is it? Sorry, I completely forgot. I'm blanking. Bishwendu, Dr. Bishwendu, it's over to you. You have something to say, and then I have 2 questions to ask, which are from the questions that people have asked.
Because I think most of the things is covered, but I have the 2 comments here. This one is the misinformation. It is because unintended misinformation is always unintended, but of course it's a wrong information. But at the initial stage, I told that there is a crisis of the source and authentication. Most of the cases, sources are biased, and this led to the misinformation in some cases. So the solution is here with the community interaction and interaction to the cross section. And now social media is actually dominating. So let us share the information only when it is verified, because we all are claiming to be the legitimate citizen and educated people. So we should not post the information like this which is half truth or somehow mislead to the concept. So this is the one thing I want to say. And second, this second point, that's what regarding land patta issue. Someone has told about land patta issue. I know this Tripura, if you look at the records, Tripura is one of the top ranking state, but the problem is the law has given you the scope to get the land right, but how you can use it, because the people do not have money, how you can monetize this land. So I think there is some kind of dilemma over the implementation part. I think the government, we must ask the government that if you allow, well, I think 6 acres of land to each of the owner, so you have to give him the adequate number of fund, whatever convergence you have, you give it to the person, then he can monetize this issue, this land. He can get something out of this land. Unnecessary, you are plotting something in a forest land, in a deep forest, and saying, Mr. X, you are this much of land has been allotted to you, but it has no use, because unless and until he is getting access to the land, or he does not have enough money to monetize it or to use this land. This is another point. And third point is the environmental issue, what the friend told. So I think this environmental issues for crisis, whatever we have, this is still is a bearable level in Tripura. But I don't feel that if we are sitting idle, it will not happen. Whatever JICA and Indo-German project is doing in Tripura, it is really horrible. It is actually looting out of the fund. So I think this civil society should come together and to raise voice against this kind of misutilization of fund, because some people, some officers, and some vested interest groups are making money in the name of poor people. So this much, I want to stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bishwendu. Okay, so let's take 2 more questions. And in fact, I'm going to bunch these questions together. We have a long question coming in from Muktalata Jamatia, for which the answer, I think, will be a conversation between them and Sunil. But there is something they've asked about the term indigenous, the debate around the word indigenous. Anyone wants to weigh in on that? And finally, we can also club that with another question from Samvel Debarma, who says, I would like to know, how much Tripura's terminologies are colonized at this point in time. And maybe that will be a long list, or maybe not, I don't know. But they are also asking another question, which is it really necessary to decolonize if it is not harming anyone particularly? So can we just have a comment? I mean, anyone wants to speak, go ahead, please. Any of our speakers, that is. Anyone wants to speak? I can see a number of you have thoughts, but are hesitating. Please don't hesitate.
Yeah, can I say?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's important to decolonize studies on Tripura. Why it's important is because if you look at both scholarly when I say in the arena of academic writings, as well as in the journalistic writing. So, I mean, Tripura has not been so much into the academic writing and as well as in the journalistic writing. And most of the journalist writings are also being predominantly, established in Agartala and other, all those big towns. So we don't have any well-established journalists till today. I mean, that's in my observation. So one might disagree with me. That's okay to disagree. So that is one point. And the second point is it's important that the tribal scholars should be part of the policies that is concerning to tribes in Tripura. Rather, most of the policy that is concerning Tripura is actually, being what you call other people, I mean, other non-tribal comes there and give some observation. So it's important that, you can come together and live together and decolonize only when you allow different people, everybody get along each other, and that's how one can live together.
Good to know.
I think RKS
want to talk about indigeneity and indigenous and tribal, the use of those words. Romita, can I ask you if you'd want to talk about that? How you use these words, for example, that will be useful for us.
Yes, I'll try from my side. Because it is often a debate, like in India, we don't call indigenous. We are constitutionally recognized as tribals. So that is the term we use mostly in our country. If we look at to other countries in comparison, and if you talk internationally, then we hear indigenous. But if we come back to our home country, we don't hear as such, and we are known as tribals. But specifically, like in Northeast India, we want to be recognized as indigenous. We feel like that is more appropriate terminology for us. So in that way, it is very important to know indigenous, what is tribals. But I will not go into tribals, but I would rather say that indigenous is a group of people which have a distinct cultural and social groups that shares ancestral ties to the land and natural resources where they live. So if you look at these defined terms, these defined definitions, then we feel like the so-called tribals of Tripura, we have indigenous connections, and we would rather like to be termed as indigenous because we uh, we have been living here. We have a historical connections, and we if we look back to history, we have, because Tripura is a princely state which is ruled by the kings. So far we have documented 184 kings which has ruled, and we have been the subjects of the kings. So in that way, the historical connection shows that we deserve to be called indigenous, but however, in our country, we are being defined as tribal. So that is how we are being recognized.
Understood. This is a question that came up in our previous Arunachal Pradesh roundtable as well. And undoubtedly it will come up in future roundtables. I have two important announcements, but I think RK wanted to say something. Let's finish off with RK because he's raised his hand.
Okay, so
Can we quickly wrap
yeah,
up?
just to cover this two questions on misinformation, right? More than facts or misinformation, what is important for us is knowledge production, right? What kind of knowledge we produce on Tripura. So I think we need to listen to what Mr. is telling us about the need to decolonize knowledge production. The second on indigeneity, indigeneity usually shouldn't be understood as indigenous versus non-indigenous. It's never the case anywhere, right? Indigenous is not against the settler. It's against the idea of the liberal settler state, not against the settler, right? Plus, indigeneity, it is a language of native without being nativist. So we have to understand indigeneity being a native, but on a nativist ideology. That's all from my side.
Thank you, RK. I just want to say, for the last almost 2 hours, we've spoken about history of Tripura, resource extractivism, women's rights, indigenous rights, linguistic issues, how to approach doing research on Tripura, settler colonial issues, so on and so forth. It's been a real range of issues. There is one thing, though, that, Romita brought up, that she's the lone woman speaker in this panel. I just want to acknowledge what you said, Romita. And I also want to say, we tried our best to contact other women experts. And this is a constant issue with us. We are always aware of this. And we try to bring gender parity as much as possible. Sometimes we are not, we're not able to do it. So I just wanted to acknowledge that question that you brought up, and also tell you that we are constantly trying. We all advise you as we go forward to email us the names of women experts, because in the northeastern states, particularly coming from the mainland, other than, we have 2 members from the northeast in our team right now leading this effort. But, that's really not enough. So sometimes we don't know enough names. So kindly email us the names of these women experts, and we will try to work with them in the future. 2 things I want to say. We are going to have 6 more states roundtables. We've spoken a lot about Tripura today. For that, my deep thanks. And what we'll do is we will put together a report on today's conversation. We'll publish it on our website, boomlive.in. We'll find the YouTube recording of this conversation as well as a resource, because we've had some very valuable people talk about, and we just couldn't give enough time to every one of them. But these are all people, that you should just get in touch with and learn about their work. I'm talking to the audience specifically. So that's one thing. The second thing is we are putting together a handbook for people who want to understand how to talk about issues in the Northeast, and specifically on Tripura and other states. And this is a continuous process. And we will come out with the handbook somewhere towards the end of October or November. And we'll work with you on that. And if you want to work with us, try and get in touch with us. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much. And we'll be back with another roundtable very, very soon.